Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the House of Bricks Live. Those of you who've been following us, you know we are featuring some of the best in class people. All of those people in the intro video have been previous podcast and live event guests for the House of Bricks. Over the last 27 years, I have built some incredible relationship capital, and I've done it through being authentic and asking people how I can help. And if you can be more interested in others than trying to be interesting, you will build a lot of relationship capital for you, and you will receive the exponential benefits of the give first mindset. And today, I would like to welcome a very special guest, Kurt David. So him and I connected through my Vistage CEO group. And Kurt David, I'd like to welcome you to the House of Bricks Live.
Appreciate it, Adam. It's my pleasure. Thank you.
So I know we recently connected, and I know some about you, but I'm one of those people that actually like to let other people introduce themselves first, because sometimes people will go into all the great things they've done, and then you sit there and it's like, well, man, 90% of that time I was struggling. You know, it sounds really good, all these highlights, but tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, first of all, Adam, let me talk about you. I guess House of Bricks, anything we know, when we build a house on bricks, the foundation is much better. And so what you're doing is amazing with the podcast, with the live broadcast, with the consulting that you do as well. So I really admire that and appreciate what you're doing. As far as what I do, I can't talk about what I do without talking about who I am first. And who I am first is from the foundation which I grew up, which there was 8 of us in a house with 1 bathroom. So you learn early on in life that life is not about you, right? When you have 8 people in a house with 1 bath. We had 6 kids. All 6 of us kids were on athletic scholarship, and 2 of us played professionally. So imagine that household growing up, extremely competitive. My mom was a teacher and a coach at a local private school that we attended. So basically we had the keys to the gym anytime we wanted. And Malcolm Gladwell talks about the 10,000 hours. Well, I don't know if it was exactly 10,000 hours, but we got a lot of gym time. There's no question as a result of that. And so that was a big foundation of who I am, was growing up in the family, very strong local community where we grew up, and very active in sports. And one of the things that I've learned from being involved with sports is it's not just the sport itself, but the lessons we learn from the sports that we play. So you can't tell on camera, but I'm 6 foot 9 inches tall, or like I tell people, 4 foot and 33 inches tall. And so, as they say, you can't coach 6'9", you can't coach 7 foot, right? That happens. And so, I was blessed with the ability to have a physical stature, and then worked a little bit to get to different levels. And so high school, college, played professionally overseas, and really enjoyed that aspect of it. And that was a fun part of growing up, as well as having an opportunity in sports as a player, as an athlete.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate you sharing that. And I wish I was 6'9", at least for the younger part of my life, right? After you're done playing basketball, it can be inconvenient flying on planes. And
I was just going to say airplanes and buying suits, right? My wife hates shopping for me. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I love, just kind of the story. And I think I don't know if I could do the 1 bathroom thing. I've done plenty of hockey tournaments with my sons, sometimes 2, 3 in a room. Like I make them go to the lobby, like you guys you're going down to the lobby for that. So you played professionally, and what are you up to now? I know you're working with actually something that we've coached some fellow athletes on, but once you reach the top of the mountain, it's kind of like, what do I do next? Whether it's becoming the CEO of a company or exiting, we have a big audience of entrepreneurs and startup founders that all want to get to the top of the mountain. It's like, okay, I made it. Now what?
No, that's an excellent point, Adam. And as we know in sports, we say this often, it's easier to get to the top of the mountain than stay on top of the mountain. So once you have that mountain experience, whether it be in sports or whatever it is that you're involved with, how do you remain there? And my term is always remaining relevant. How do we remain relevant, especially in transition? When it comes to pro sports, as we know, 100% of professional athletes ultimately lose their job, right? Undeniable fact. At some point, you're done playing. And so the question is, how do you handle that? And for me, when I was done playing pro sports, I took a year off, right? I'm trying to find myself. I was upset. It was an injury that really ended it soon. And it was just, how do I become relevant again? That wasn't exactly in my mind at that time, but I took a year off, and partway through that year, I got tired of feeling that way, of just feeling angry or upset. So I decided to go to graduate school, start working on a master's in counseling. So that was my next stage of my life. I was actually an elementary teacher, and then I became a middle school counselor, and I started helping others and finding more purpose in my life again. And during that journey, when I was doing that, I actually came up with an idea. And that idea was to sit down with other former pro athletes and hear about their life after pro sports, and more importantly, how they recreated their success. So I interviewed 20 former Detroit Pistons, Tigers, Red Wings, and Lions about their life after pro sports. And that's what dawned the idea of the book From Glory Days. And the book did very well and turned into a TV show. So when my agent and I at that time were like, boy, this book, the concept is pretty solid. Let's look at a TV show. So we created a TV show. We've done 4 seasons. We won an Emmy Award with one of my interviews with Rocky Bleier out of Pittsburgh, who won 4 Super Bowls, was a war hero. And so we continue to develop that brand. And during that journey, Adam, I thought, boy, I speak a lot on transition with these athletes. And then I started seeing a lot of parallels and commonalities of success. So I started creating a program that I was actually sharing with corporations and companies about transition. These are the 5 roles of change, I call them, when we talk about leading change and how to communicate during change. And so that's kind of the flag I put in the ground now when I speak and we'll do workshops, is on the topic of change. I was just in Grand Rapids yesterday, did a 3-hour workshop with some teachers, a whole group of teachers over there, about the changes they're going through. And so, I love it. It's what I enjoy doing. I have a teaching background, so I enjoy teaching people, helping people. And for me, it's on the topic of change. And so what spawned the idea of my own playing career turned into a book, turned into a TV show, turned into a speaking engagements. And we actually now have a weekly radio show called From Glory Days Veterans Editions, in which we interview former veterans about their transition after that they're the civilian, back into civilian life, because we find there's a lot of parallels with pro athletes and military with what they go through in that transition.
Yeah, well, you're speaking my language, sports and business and men who served our country. So my grandfather, he was in World War II, huge impact on my life, actually from Grand Rapids, Holland, Michigan. And, he was Dutch Reformed, raised on welfare. His dad passed away when he was 10. So imagine single mom, kind of that same thing. And has always taught me the value of appreciating what you have and giving to a point where it's almost what you don't have. It's just the more you give, the more you receive. And so he kind of instilled that in me. Is there anything that people can do, kind of preventative preparation, so to speak, like as you're climbing the mountain? And no one's going to do it. We're just going to talk about it. It'll be good advice, and no one does it. Because in order to get to the top of the mountain, your blindness is great because you're trying to do something impossible, but you're also blind to the collateral damage you're causing to yourself, the people you lead, your friends, family, and so forth. But are there any practical things you're talking to athletes, like, hey, retirement's coming up, or that transition you talked about? Like, what are some things that we could practically do?
Yeah, no, absolutely, Adam. In fact, I want to answer that question, but I want to first bring up a point that you just brought up was, sometimes people understand there's something going to happen or something going to change, but they don't acknowledge it or don't put the work into preparing for it, right? And that's a huge aspect. When you talk about the topic of change, if you look at the primal aspect of change in our brain, and in fact, I've done a lot of research, written a lot of books and articles about the topic, people actually equate change with fear. They equate change with almost death, right? That it's that scary of an item. Some people embrace change, they're a little more open to it, they understand it, but most people in our primal aspect, and if they look at scans and whatnot with the brain studies, they also see that it triggers a lot of fear, it triggers a lot of almost frantic type approach to it. And so, understanding that, we also understand that they've been talking about change for centuries, right? The only constant in life is change. Heraclitus in 500 BC mentioned that. And so understanding that change is going to happen, right? It's just a matter of how do we embrace it. I always say, Adam, that the best leaders aren't simply on the front wave of change. They're causing that wave of change. A great example of that is Apple, right? Whether you like Apple products or not, for
I
many,
do.
many years, they were on the front edge of the change. They were causing the change as a result. But back to answering your question, Adam, yeah, what I've learned through my research from working with former professional athletes and now with big corporations and companies is that there's commonalities of success. I had mentioned I have a counseling background. And so one of the things in counseling you look for is patterns, right? You're looking for patterns. And I started noticing there was a pattern with the athletes. And then I started noticing there was patterns with the organizations and clients that I worked with. And that's where I created my 5 roles of change. And I like using acronyms because I'm a simple guy and it was a way for me to remember what the 5 things were. So I used the acronym RULES, RULES. And each letter stands for something. Each letter means something. And if it's okay, I'd love to share that right now, just as a crib note version, right? We can go very deep into this, or I could share a very quick version of my 5 roles of change.
Yeah, please do.
So the first letter R stands for refocus. What I've discovered is that anybody going through a transition or change has what I call a refocus. And that refocus is a time for strategic planning. It's a time for evaluating my past goals, establishing current goals. If I'm an organization, it's an absolute time to pull in a team to say, why are we changing? What are we changing specifically? And then start talking about what is the process for that, right? That's what the refocus is. A great example of that is I can't talk about sports without talking about beer, right? I don't drink personally myself, but on January 19th, or I'm sorry, January 20th in 1920, something monumental happened in our country. And for those history buffs, they might know it was called Prohibition. So imagine this, Adam, there was 1,274 breweries in America at that time. And on that date, those 1,274 breweries were told they can no longer brew beer and sell beer. So we know 80% of them closed, but 244 remained open during Prohibition. And so as I was doing research about, boy, what did they do? One of the breweries that I was researching and studying, they had a refocus. They went from brewing beer to brewing malt extract, ginger ale, even making car and auto parts during that time. And as a result of their refocus, Anheuser-Busch not only survived Prohibition, but they're the biggest brewery in the world as a result. But that's just an example of a refocus. And one of the first steps in order to get through a transition and start preparing for that transition. So it's a planning stage. It's a why. It's a what that questions are being answered. So that's the R. The next letter is U, which stands for using your network. In other words, all of us have a vast network of people around us. Internal network, external network. And what I found is individuals and organizations that tap into that internal and external network know what their refocus is. They know what their strategic plan is. They know what their new goals are. And they start looking at their network saying, boy, who internally or who externally can help us accomplish these goals? Now, I always want to qualify. I'm not talking about using and abusing people. In other words, you want to create win-win relationships with those people, but certainly looking at, boy, is there somebody internally that I can use or externally? I brought up about the example of Anheuser-Busch. They already had a distribution path well in plan for their beer. Well, when Prohibition hit, they already had that distribution plan in place. So they used that network to say, hey, we're not brewing beer anymore, but could you help us distribute malt extract and ginger ale? And as a result, it helped them with that transition much quicker and smoother by using their network. So that's the U. That's an example of using your network as a result during the transition. The L, RUL, bar none, without argument, no question, is the most difficult for pro athletes. Letting go. And the reason why is it's in the marrow of our bones to fall down 7, get up 8, right? We don't give up. And so it's very difficult for a pro athlete, and sometimes even for corporations, to let go of whatever they need to let go of in order to move forward. A great example of that is Ford Motor Company executive that I had a chance to sit down with. I was asking them some hard questions. I said, how did you guys get through 2008, right? The economic downturn we had in 2008. Other car companies were taking money, taking loans. Ford Motor Company was not. And he said, well, one of the things we had to let go of was the fact that we were spending millions of dollars promoting quality is job one, right? That's something that we spent a lot of money on, telling people quality is job one. He said, we had to let go of that because we realized we weren't doing it. And said, once we let go of that and started refocusing on creating quality, they started bringing out some more quality products. And as a result, Ford Motor Company's turned, profits every quarter since as a result. just an example of letting go. And everybody has their own timetable of what time they let go, what they need to let go of. It could be an emotional component. It could be something very practical that they have to let go of in order to move forward. But an important aspect of moving forward. So RUL, letting go. The E kind of goes back to what you just talked about. Everybody knows what to do, but may not do it. And that's execute. In other words, you're going to execute your plan. Part of the refocus is creating a plan, the why and the what we're doing that, but executing that plan, because when it comes to change and transition, Adam, it's not easy, right? It's rarely one and done. In fact, I like using the example of a water pump, the old handle water pumps. Remember those? I mean, some people that might be watching may not understand what an old handled water pump is, but basically it's a pump where you have to pump the handle in order to get water. And rarely do you pump it once and you get water. Sometimes you have to pump it, you put a little more water in it, and you have to pump it again. Well, it's that way in the change process. Rarely do we pump it once and we get that change automatically, right? I mean, if you do, great. That means you really did a great job of refocusing, using your network and letting go, but rarely it happens that way. This is where the grit comes in. This is where it's like, okay, boy, we got to work at this. I also like using something called PDCA during this process. And that's plan, do, check, and adjust. Because when you're executing your plan, sometimes you plan it, you do it, you check the results, but then you find out you have to adjust slightly. In other words, there might have to be an adjustment to your plan of transition in order to get it to work optimally. But that's the executing your plan. So RULE. And the last letter S stands for someone. What I've discovered, Adam, is that anybody, an individual or organization going through a transition, has someone, a mentor, so to speak, that helps them specifically get through that transition. Great example is that is a friend of mine who played in the NBA for 8 years. He, when he was not playing on the road, he'd come back to Detroit and literally was like, man, I'm enamored by TV. So he would go into one of the local studios and hang out with this guy and learn more about, how to be a TV broadcaster and how's TV work. And as a result of doing that and having that mentor, Greg Kelser is now over 30 years worth of TV broadcasting for the Detroit Pistons, right? Because he had a mentor early on. Even when he was still playing, he had that mentor who was helping him learn about TV. And, that's an example from pro sports. From the business world, I mentioned about Ford Motor Company. One of the things they said they did during that 2008 downturn is they brought in a mentor. And that mentor was somebody that actually had been through an economic downturn when they on a word back in 1980. And Lee Iacocca was somebody that actually used to work for Ford, went to Chrysler, turned Chrysler around during the economic downturn in the 1980s. And so they were tapping into knowledge from Lee Iacocca saying, boy, how'd you do this? What did you do? What are some things we do? And so they had a mentor as well. So RULES, refocus, use your network, let go, execute your plan, and someone, a mentor, so to speak. So that, from a 30,000 foot level, those are the 5 rules of change. We could spend a half day just talking about each one of those, working through each one of those with the individual and company, but that's it in a nutshell.
No, and that's a great framework. And for everyone that's listening, like Kurt and I didn't plan this, we didn't prep, but I'll see your acronym and raise you one. So we have one as well that we teach entrepreneurs, which is, it's our simple framework. So you mentioned simple, it's strategy, right? You got to have a plan of where you're going to go and know that how you get there may deviate at times, like nothing and success is never a straight line. Innovation is the I. So you have to continuously innovate, which sometimes means actually doing less, not more. Type A people, we're always like, oh, I got to do more and innovate. And it's actually doing less better than more not good enough. M is mindset, right? You got to have the right mindset. And the reason that's in the middle is because we all start things with a great mind. We have a dream, and then the dream meets reality, and you got to have the right mindset. Patterns, which you mentioned, there's patterns in who you are as an entrepreneur person, things that were handed down generationally to you that you may not even know. Recognizing patterns in your business, what's working, what isn't. The L stands for leverage for us. So knowing what time to leverage in your business, you have to do all the difficult work first before you decide what you should and should not leverage. And then we share the E, which is execution. It does come down to execution, and executing doesn't always mean making the right decision. Because when you make decisions, it creates action that gives you feedback to make better decisions as you progress. And so really good stuff there. And in terms of these athletes, and I have had a couple on my show I respect really highly, Wayne Simeon, Derek Anderson. So both had successful college NBA careers, won a championship with the Miami Heat. What I'm most impressed by is like what they're doing after that career. Because when you climb the mountain, it's really who can do it multiple times. Just for me and my background, starting this is now my 7th different company, it's tough. But what people have to understand is it's actually in the valley where you learn the most. It's where you get the tools to climb the next mountain. It reflects who you are, what you just went through, and what you mentioned about having mentors and community. High achievers are blind to their own weakness and their own situation, and oftentimes unable to let go, right? Like the guy that wears his varsity jacket to the 10-year high school reunion, yeah, dude, you were the captain of the football team 10 years ago. Like, what are you doing now?
The glory days. Yeah, the glory days. Yeah, absolutely.
Appropriate title for the TV show and book. So is the TV show still running now? Are you still filming?
Yeah, we haven't filmed anything recently. We're on Amazon Prime. We're also on Roku right now. They're running all the replays there. You can find it on YouTube as well. The radio show and the podcast on Spotify and iTunes, that's a weekly show. You can find it on WJR, which is Michigan's largest radio station. That's a weekly show. And also the replays are on those two platforms, Spotify and iTunes right now. And so you can find it there. If you go to WJR.com and type in From Glory Days, you'll find it. You'll see the past episodes as well, or hear the past episodes. But if I can back up a little bit, Adam, what you just shared was GOLD, this simple acronym that you shared. It's GOLD. And one of the things that I'd like to share on a personal note is that, you talked about how we have blind spots. And one of the things that I discovered by sitting down with a coach many years ago was he shared with me as I was going through all the items. This is probably 6-8 years ago. He goes, Kurt, you're involved with this, 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 you're involved with this. He says, they're all great things, but the problem is you're involved with this, you're involved with this, you're involved with this, you're involved with this. I mean, he said, you need to narrow your focus. And it's like, wow, it was a blind spot for me because I thought I was doing great things, and I was, but I wasn't able to optimize. And this is what I've learned. In order to get to the highest level, you have to become even more laser focused. You do it as an athlete, but even in business as well. And back to your point, we have to how do we become relevant? How do you continue to become relevant, right? Whether it be an athlete or a business, things are constantly changing. And that's a question I have for you, Adam. What are you noticing is one of the biggest roadblocks, or a couple of the biggest roadblocks for people or organizations changing, in your opinion?
Well, you nailed it. It is focus. So entrepreneurs tend to chase shiny objects, and understandably so, because you're typically all in on this business. You're looking at, okay, what's my long-term strategy that you set? But then you're also staring down, hey, we have a $80,000 payroll due Friday. How are we going to make that happen? And what you just mentioned about coaching, mentorship, it's not just because I'm an advisor. I have an advisor. I eat my own dog food. So if I'm telling you to get an advisor, I have one. Financial advisor. I have a business advisor. Marital counseling when my wife thinks we need it, which is most of the time. But that's a whole nother episode of being married to an entrepreneur for 27 years. But the real value and why we started our new program called Startup X, the Startup X Accelerator, is for founders to have focus. They all think two things. I can call 20 founders today and get the same answer. We need more capital and we need more sales. But the question that they never ask is, how do I understand my customer more? And I just posted about this today. It's just unbelievable how focused they are on those two constraints. And again, understandably so, you want more money in. But if you go to your customer and find out how you can solve one of their problems, they're going to pay you to fix it. It's that easy. So asking yourself, how do I understand my customer more instead of worrying about I need cash and sales, that kind of takes care of it. But to answer your question, it's the same reason, Michael Jordan needs a coach or Tiger Woods needs a coach. Like fellow basketball player, you play professional, been around a lot of pro athletes. Like what on earth could someone teach Michael Jordan about basketball? But it's the objective view of what needs to be done in the game at the right time, how to utilize the players on your team. Like, look how much better Scottie Pippen made Michael Jordan, right? And I think now Scottie's kind of taken some credit, like Michael Jordan didn't win a championship without him. But anyway, I won't go down that. Till I go to the grave, Michael Jordan's the best basketball player to ever walk the face of the earth and ever will. But it's being able to see kind of how the pieces fit together. We've seen dream team type teams be put together and they still can't win. Like right. Miami, they didn't win the first year. They had LeBron, Wade, and Bosh. So it takes a coach or an advisor to get the pieces to work together. And the most important part of a business, it's not the business model, it's the entrepreneur. It's do they have the right mindset? Are they leading themselves in a way that people will want to follow? Like using that self-leadership as an attraction mechanism. So we speak the same language for sure, business, basketball. I know we share the same faith as well. I noticed that on your LinkedIn profile. So really appreciate you joining us on the House of Bricks today. Any closing thoughts or questions?
No, appreciate it, Adam. It's an honor to be involved with people like you that are looking to make an impact as well. Like I tell people, my purpose on this earth is to serve God and serve others. And I look to use my gifts and abilities in order to do that. And if I can help somebody, they can go to my website, kurtdavid.com, and I'd be happy to help and see if there's something I can do to help. But I appreciate it, Adam.
All right. Well, thank you again for joining the House of Bricks live. And yes, we're truly live. I just saw the Amazon guy. He comes every time I go live. So that's why I miss my studio in Minneapolis. And I joke about this all the time. My wife can't order one time on Amazon everything. It's just like a consistent flow throughout the day. So I've got to keep growing my business to keep up with Amazon for sure. So appreciate you joining, Kurt. And again, anyone that wants to get connected with Kurt, we put the link in the chat as well. And Kurt, look forward to connecting with you for lunch sometime soon.
No, I appreciate it. It's my honor.
All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you.